in today's Watercolor Wednesday video, I want to start getting in the festive spirit for some seasonal holiday mixed media collages. So to do that, I'm going to start prepping some paper with some green values, and then I'm also going to do one with reds and maybe even some grays. So I have a little something I can play with, perhaps for snowman or snow, parts of candy canes, I'm not sure. So the first step I'm going to do is I'm going to wet my paper a little bit, and I'm going to be using my Blick Liquid Watercolors because they're really nice and bold and vibrant, and they give me a really great splash of color right off the bat. Now, I want to have a range of values, so I'm going to go ahead and throw down some yellow. Blick Liquid Watercolors, as I've mentioned in other videos, are a little syrupy. I might actually pick up some of this color. I'm gonna get a second sheet of paper. I'm gonna do a second loose sheet of paper just kind of on the side to pick up some of this excess color so that I'm not wasting it. So I'm gonna go ahead and pick up some of that excess yellow and move that over here. It'll be lighter because it's not coming straight out of the bottle, but that's okay. And that'll give me two different papers to work with. This one is going to buckle a little bit because I didn't tape it down ahead of time. All right, I've got a little bit of green. I could get a palette out. Might as well do that. I'm going to pick it up with a loaded brush. And then by doing it this way, I still get that really bold saturated color, but I don't have to worry about as much gloopiness. Actually, I'm just going to go for it. And for this texture, I'm going to go ahead and use the plastic wrapped technique, one of my favorites, because that's going to give me, that works the best I have found to date with liquid watercolor, with Blick Liquid Watercolor, I should say. Because it's so syrupy, I have to be a little bit careful. Like, not everything works the same way. You know, like I figured out that salt will work, but the salt texture becomes cloudy. Super strange. Whoops, super strange chemical reaction. All right. Put that on there. Now, the thing about doing textured watercolor papers, you really have to let go of any judgment, you know, any inner critic, any of that stuff, and just play. Slap down the color, see what happens, because it's all going to be fine in the end. Whatever does happen, it's going to be all right. And when it dries, it's going to look totally different. And then when you add the texture to it, it's going to look totally different. And then when you cut it up, it looks totally different. So just have some fun slapping down color. I'm going to get the saran wrap. So this is just regular plastic wrap that you can find for storing food. Pull off a nice big sheet. This time I'm going to scrunch it up. Put it down. It's going to give kind of a stained glass look to it when it's dry. So anywhere the plastic touches is where the effect is going to happen. This isn't something that you plan ahead of time. This is just something that you just go for. As long as it's scrunched up and not flattened out, you're going to get a really neat effect. So this is going to give me a really beautiful texture for what I'm hoping are going to become Christmas trees and maybe a wreath too. But then I'm also hoping that I can use the extra to maybe do some seaweed and some other projects. I'm really enjoying doing sea theme pieces these days. Now I have to let this dry, and then I'll come back and check on it and peel it off to do the texture reveal. All right, now my plastic wrap papers are dry, so we're gonna peel it off. Super interesting. So as a review, I use the liquid watercolor instead of my tube watercolor. And much like happened with the salt technique that I tried with liquid watercolor, I've got this cloudy effect again. Now, the one thing I do really like about this is that it's different. I like the fact that I have a very different technique happening here. even though I'm using the same, a very different appearance, even though I'm using the same technique, but the use of Blick Liquid Watercolor, at least, is giving me a cloudy effect, which is very, very interesting. Also, I'm used to this watercolor being much bolder, and this feels pretty muted and kind of subtle. So that's another interesting observation. But the cool thing about this is it's something different. So I can do the same thing with something I have, with materials I have a lot of, and get a very, very different effect, which gives me more range and options in my textured papers, which is very cool. The other interesting thing is that, well, it was a combination of laying down with the brush and just dropping it on there, and that didn't really change things much either. There's a little bit more texture happening here, but this may have just had more color or more liquid in general on it, or it might have just squinched up, might have been wetter, lots of factors in here. But these are super interesting. So if you have some liquid watercolor, or regular watercolor, check it out, try it, see how it goes. Let me know in the comments what happens, especially if you have a liquid watercolor at home to try this with. And if you do, please get in touch and let me know what brand you're using and how it turned out. I would love to see. So that's that plastic wrap technique on Blick liquid watercolor. Very interesting. All right, now I want to create a red decorative paper to go with my green. I also want to do something for snow on this side. So I'm going to go ahead and work wet on wet with this because I love having the color move around. And I'm just going to see what happens. I know that I want to have kind of a jolly red situation, but I don't want to have it be just kind of a one note. I want to have some variation. So I think I'm gonna start with my Liquitex acrylic ink first. Shake it up. And I'm gonna drop that down onto my wet area, my wet paper. And then I'm just gonna let that do its thing. But actually I think I might splatter, I'm gonna grab my big brush and kind of splatter some water into it to help it move a little bit more without touching the paper. I want lots of color movement, but I don't really want to manipulate it with the bristles of the brush, if I can help it. Just because it gives it a different look when the water and the ink or the watercolor do their thing. And then I'm going to go ahead and put in a little bit of Blick Liquid Watercolor. But this time I want, instead of dropping it down and having it splatter everywhere, I want to control where it goes because it's not a terribly different color red to my acrylic ink. So this is Blick Liquid Watercolor. I'm going to grab a smaller brush and I'm going to go ahead and instead of splashing it on, I'm just going to kind of touch it down. And that area is not very wet. So use my water bottle, kind of give everything a spritz, which is going to add some more texture. And this is so gummy that I think I'm actually going to add water to it to help it move more. All right, so now I've watered it down. We're going to see what that does. See, it's not very different from what's already happening. It's a little different. And I've got some puddles happening because of the way the paper is warping with the moisture. And I want to leave some of my whites because that's going to give me variation without having pinks in there. So let's do this. I'm going to play with pulling the color back a little bit. And I'm going to do it using one of my cloths. So this is a blotting technique where you can do it with paper towel, kitchen towel, napkins, cloths, whatever you have on hand. You just kind of blot up some of the color that you put down. It does take on the texture of the material that you're using to blot with. And it also pulls up the color. So the nice thing about that is now I can go back in and I can add more color, and I have some nice value ranges happening. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of drop in some more of the acrylic ink. And that's going to add even more range, even though we're working with a very limited color palette. Let's see, what else could we do here? Let's grab, I like to save different materials from around the house, like toilet paper tubes and paper towel rolls, and use those to move around art materials. So I'm just picking up the acrylic ink and watercolor that's on the page and stamping back into my paper. Just letting the circles overlap. You could also squash the tube and create a different shape. But when it picks it up from the very saturated areas and I stamp over into a less saturated area, I get those bold rings, which is pretty great. All right, I'm going to go ahead and let that dry, although I do kind of want to take up some more of the puddles. I'm just going to dab into them and then wipe my brush off. I'm not going to put any water on my brush because I don't want to take out the saturation. I just don't want the puddle there. So I'm dabbing, wiping off the brush, dabbing, wiping. I want the boldness, but I don't want to pull up any more of the color. I'm just using my brush like a sponge. All right, we're going to let that dry. And then let's work on the other side. I want to do a mixed media holiday winter scene. I have some blue paper prepped. I have some green paper prepped. Now I've got some red that's going to dry and do its thing. So if I think of other holiday colors, I would like to play with snow, but it's complicated when you're in the land of watercolor. So let's see what we can do. I'm going to take some of my India ink and I'm going to mix up a couple different light washes of it. I'm going to go put some water in these cups. This is my Blick India ink. So I'm going to go ahead and drop a little bit into each cup. And I'm hoping to create really light washes. So I'm actually going to do a test for this. I have some extra paper. So I'm going to go ahead and grab my brush and swirl around cup number 1. Pretty light, that's great. Cup number 2, not much difference. Cup number 3, different. Cup number 4, kind of the same. So let's see. 2 and 3 were the same. So let's try to change that. So now cup number 2, darker. Cup number 3, even darker. So now I have, well, probably pretty the same. That's okay. It'll be fine. So let's see what happens here. I've got a wet paper. And I want to go pretty minimal because my goal is to have something I can use for snow. My paper is reacting like crazy to the water and getting so wobbly. That's okay. It'll be fine. I'm going to take my small brush and my lightest color, lightest value of gray. And I'm just going to kind of splatter. This is going to end up looking like dirty snow. It's just making me not unhappy. All right, so we're going to scrap the snow idea, or at least the ink for the snow idea. We're going to go ahead and do something else. We're going to go with blue instead. And my paper is coming up. That's a bummer. All right, let's tape that back down. So now we're going to, this is a pearlescent FW ink. We're just going to play with that instead. This can be our snow. And then we can go over the top of it with white. And it'll be great. So we'll maintain a lot of our white on our page as best we can. And just see what happens. And I think it'll be very jolly and festive and fun. And with some mark making back into it, and some colored pencil, it's going to be awesome. That's beautiful and simplistic. I think I will add, it's a risk to put in a little bit of black, but I love experimenting. So let's see. Yeah, it's gonna, it's not going how I want it to. That's okay. Whoops, and I got it on my red. Ah! The great thing is this paper is getting used for collage. So it doesn't matter that it got on the red because it's gonna be used, it's gonna be cut up. So that's okay. All right, let's grab a little red and kind of cover over, actually while we're at it, put some more texture into this one without losing the roundness of the stamping. This is a good start. I'm going to go back with some silver, some of the pearl. These are all acrylic inks by Daleroni. This one is white pearl, but it's going to look silver when I put it over the blue. Kind of. It's becoming a metallic white. It's great. It's going to give me the snow effect that I want, and it's going to mellow out the black. That was an interesting idea, and it's going to be super cool. Awesome. I love it. All right, I'm going to let these dry. Once they're dry, I'm then going to start crafting my holiday mixed media collage. So that one I'm going to share in a secondary video, but now I have my cloudy green from using the liquid watercolor with plastic wrap. I've got some stamping that I did with a toilet paper tube using acrylic ink and liquid watercolor. And then I've got kind of a wash of splitchy splotchiness from using acrylic ink there as well, with a little bit of India ink splashed in for experimental interest. I think this is going to be really fun. I am very excited to start creating some mixed media holiday collages. If you are also creating some decorative papers, I would love to see it. So if you share those online, be sure to tag me, because who doesn't love checking out beautiful decorative papers? And if you are also creating some holiday projects, whether it be mixed media collage or otherwise, tag me too, because I would love to see those as well. It's always fun to connect with other artists, especially during such a wonderful season. Till next time.